We are recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are just letting people in from the waiting room. Just give it a couple minutes here and we'll get started. Thanks everyone for being here. Welcome again. All right. Just a quick note to everybody who's here that this session is being recorded. We also have closed captions turned on, and so those should be available on your end for those who need them just by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. We're going to wait maybe 30 seconds here for more people to join, but then we will get started. All right, I think we have a good amount of people in. Just another note for those who didn't hear it before, this session is being recorded. Closed captions are turned on our end, so they should be available for anyone who needs them by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. So I am Kaya, I'm with Bike Pittsburgh. I am going to hand things over to Eric, who is our advocacy director, who is the main man for today, and we'll get started with E.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. And happy Bike Anywhere week this Tuesday. We got a beautiful week so far. So hopefully people are biking somewhere. Thanks for the intro, Kaya. My name is Eric Bohr. I'm the advocacy director of Bike Pittsburgh. In a brief sort of overview, I've been with the organization for a really long time. I'm sort of the resident historian of bike infrastructure and the organization in general. And so what I'm hoping to do with this presentation today is to give a brief overview of sort of bike planning in Pittsburgh in general, and how it culminated in this this past year and a half so far in this Move Forward PGH program. Is the raise hand feature on, or can people use that?
That should be on, and you can also type questions in the chat as you're going forward, and I will kind of keep track of people who have questions. We can get to them at the end once you're done your presentation.
Got it. I was gonna ask for a show of hands to see who's seen imagery similar to this somewhere in the world over the past year or so. If you wanted to use the raise hand feature, I am just kind of curious if you've seen it or not. Okay, because hopefully you have. So why did this whole thing happen, what's going on, even among, you do have to unraise your hand too, so after you're done. um, the Thanks for that, by the way. Thanks for humoring me on that. Um, so what is this whole program? A lot of people still don't quite understand, like what's going on with it, what it even is. So I'm just going to give a quick overview first of bike planning in Pittsburgh, and then go into this program, like I said. So, oops, come on, here we go. In the beginning, we had a 1999 bike plan. That's the bike plan that we've been working off of for basically, well, for the last 20 some odd years. It was, so even up to a couple years ago, we were working off of a 1999 bike plan. It was the oldest bike plan in the whole country, next to Aurora, Colorado, who had one in 2006. And it's basically what we've been using until June of 2020. Just a brief, to think back to 1999, Mayor Murphy was the mayor, which today, as you know, is election day. The Eliza Furnace Trail was brand new, while there were like little bits of riverfront trail that existed. The only on-street bike lanes in the whole city were Beechwood Boulevard and Highland Park and the Riverview Park loops. There were zero curbside bike racks. There was no city bike map. Port Authority buses did not have bike racks on the front, so you couldn't combine bikes and transit. And Pittsburgh was consistently ranked at the bottom of Bicycling Magazine's best bicycling city list. In fact, getting worst bicycling city. So since then, one thing that a bike plan does is kind of outlines what the city wants to accomplish in terms of, what like the goal. So in this case, the goal is making the city better for bicycling. So there were a lot of things in that bike plan that did happen, such as the trail system that we see, the hot metal bridge was in that bike plan, integrating bikes and transit. There's been a whole lot of work that's been done to make that happen, and just general bike lanes in general. While not directly out of the city, that Bike Pittsburgh produces the Pittsburgh bike map, which was something identified in the bike plan. And then, so back in 2012, we started pushing for a new bike plan under Luke Ravenstall's administration. That took a long time. We didn't get very far, and then we had a new mayor. Mayor Peduto came in, and basically we got that plan to a point where almost being published. A new mayor came in who wanted to redo it. So we got to the point now where in June of 2020, we finally, the city finally published a bike plan called the Bike Plus Plan. And so that plan is a pretty important document. Like I said earlier, it's something that helps us all understand what's going to happen, but also gives the city sort of like the direction, sets the expectations for both people who want bike lanes and for people who are, just so that they know what's coming. But it also is important for gaining funding, because without an active plan, it's hard to get funding for things. So needless to say, getting this plan was a really important thing. So as you can read, it lays out a vision for a safe and connected network of on-street and off-street facilities. It's a 10-year plan, so ideally it'll be updated in 2030. It identifies critical gaps in the existing bike network and begins the process to identify projects that will solve them. So that includes 120 plus miles of new or improved on-street bike facilities, 27 miles of new trails, and also a whole bunch of new policy goals on topics from maintenance of bike infrastructure to micromobility. And I really suggest you guys check that out if you haven't seen it already. Come on. Just really quick, you can download these maps. I know you can't read them right now, but basically it just shows, the left shows what's existing today in terms of on-street bike facilities and trails, and the right shows what the hopeful future is. So a big part of this whole thing was like, yeah, it sounds great. Glad we're doing all this stuff, but we still have the public to deal with. And as you know, like, bike lanes are contentious. They've been, people have been, Bill Peduto got his nickname Bike Lane Billy, whether he deserved it or not, over this whole situation, and it's hurt him politically on somebody say on some level. Um, and in short, we just needed to do things like rally bigger and broader support, for bike infrastructure. And so how do we do that? Well, one thing that came up was this Move Forward program. So it's an initiative of the City of Pittsburgh's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure to implement their new Bike Plus plan. So they're working with local nonprofit partners like Pittsburgh, us, and Healthy Ride to engage the community, to think of ways to engage the community through the process of installing new bike-friendly connections throughout Pittsburgh. So to help out with this is an organization called People for Bikes. Where's that? Hold on, I don't know what's going on. Trying to go backwards. There we go. So People for Bikes is a national nonprofit organization that is basically an industry group, but they do a lot of lobbying. And they came up with this funding program and support program to help cities, several cities, implement their bike plans. So we are in a cohort of 4 other cities. So Providence, Denver, Austin, Texas, and New Orleans, who all have, similar thing to what's going on with Move Forward, to not only provide funds and resources to help do the physical designing of bike infrastructure, but also with help in marketing it and helping the public understand why it's happening, whether they bike or not, and how it can actually help them, even if they just drive every day. So that's where this whole less stress, more safety kind of imagery and messaging came from. All the cities in our cohort, the ones I just mentioned, are all using this similar imagery, trying to make it like, I know that's supposed to be like a generic street. It kind of looks like Pittsburgh, I guess, but the whole idea is to have, they found that they've done a lot of polling and research, and they found that these words, less stress, more safety, are things that resonate with everybody. Like there's very few people who want more stressful and less safe streets. So they found the messaging is something that was really powerful and something that helped out. So less confusion, more safety, more joy. All these words were really things that they honed in on that worked really well with to be honest, non-bike riders and people who are car drivers. Sort of the underlying theme is there will be peace on the road when everyone gets the piece of the road. And just really trying to stress that the benefits of bike infrastructure are experienced by all who use the road, whether or not they bike. I do find it an effective talking point to even say, when I drive, I prefer there to be bike infrastructure because it makes it easier to drive. And that I feel like that's something that a lot of people really resonates with a lot of people. So I'm going to briefly show a video. I'm guessing everyone on here has seen it. I saw a lot of hands raised during it, but this is the newest new video. We so far. Oh, hold on, I'll just play it if I can figure out how to do it. There we go. Okay, hopefully that worked. Nope, there we go. So the marketing campaign of all of this involved like that video I just showed, billboards, we had bus wraps. I don't have the latest figures at the moment, but in only a couple months, we saw about 2.9 million impressions and 900, almost a million video views in just the first launch of that of the campaign. That video has been seen over 300,000 times on YouTube, which is kind of cool. So it shows up on, that'll show up on social media. I'm sure a lot of you have gotten it. If you probably liked something that was related to bicycling, you've probably gotten it. It had radio spots. It showed up on streaming services like Hulu, and other streaming services, YouTube, obviously. So we really tried to get the word out about this to direct people back to the website. One other thing that People for Bikes provided was polling services. And so they recently just finished a poll. And it was a random poll of 600 people, a phone poll. Everyone took about a half hour on the phone. And they found a whole lot of things that we were pretty excited to see, actually. So on the right is a WESA article about it. But just in short, everybody agreed with a lot of those statements that we were trying to put out there, like less stress, more safety. We found that a lot of people have been involved in or know someone who had been involved in a traffic crash and have been injured or have died. And a lot of people agree that one thing that really came out was that 71% agreed that separated bike lanes create more safety and less stress for everyone on the roadways. And to be honest, we kind of made a point to make sure that the people that were polled were likely Democratic voters, to be quite frank, because that was an important thing with a mayoral election coming up. So what's all this mean? What's been built? So before I get to what has been built, just want to go over briefly what like some of the tactics. So a big part of this program is that it's supposed to be rapid build, which is kind of contradictory in terms of a lot of bike infrastructure, as it can be not so rapid build because of the levels of community outreach, public meetings, et cetera, that need to happen in order to make these things happen. So, first of all, with that, there's also a whole lot of new tools that have gone in that in the past couple of years that have been more accepted nationwide as well as in the city, that the city has been using to make some of these connections throughout Pittsburgh. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen the new protected bike lanes, these two-stage turn boxes. So sometimes some of these facilities are just improvements to existing facilities. So sometimes putting in a two-stage turn box, for instance, so that you can which helps facilitate left turns, may be part of that improvement. We all see share lane markings. Bike signals are another new tool. The bus plus bike lane, that was another new tool the city has started using on Smithfield Street downtown. And the big one that came out this year, specifically for this program, were neighborways, which the idea is to create low stress residential streets that make needed connections for bicyclists, that are really useful for bicyclists. They're on the bike network, they're on the bike plan, but maybe it's a place where we can't, say, remove parking. So it's a way to make for a low stress connection, like needed connection. Other ways to rapidly install, and that includes a lot of traffic calming to make that happen. So this year we've helped get in these things like neighborhood traffic circles, which has shown to slow traffic, if not discourage cut through traffic in the first place. Things like chicanes, which create like a horizontal element that cars have to like kind of swerve around in order to they just need to pay more attention. Speed humps, I'm sure we've all seen recently, a whole lot of speed humps have gone in. And then just simple things, sometimes just curb bump outs help out with with traffic calming, but also help pedestrians and also help prevent cars from parking directly at the curb. So a lot of that, so we have all this whole quiver of tools that we could use to make things happen. So this year, some things have gone in that we're pretty excited about. One thing, probably the grandest one so far, has been the Gap to the Point project, which is making that connection basically from the Gap Trail to the point, as the name suggests. So the gap trail being around Smithfield Street Bridge. So this is a network of improvements and bike lanes along 3rd Ave, Stanwyck Street, and Liberty Avenue downtown. So that connects to the Point State Park, but also connects to Penn Avenue bike lane. This has a whole lot of new elements to it that are new to the city in terms such as how the bus stop, the bike lane is raised up so that buses can still pull to the curb and allow people in wheelchairs to access the bus. There's bike signals involved in this project. Just as a side note, those bike signals at Stanwix and Penn/Liberty are on a radar detection, actually. So if you stop at the stop line, it'll detect that you're there and give you the exclusive bike signal to get through without worrying about any cars from any direction. The Friendship Neighborway was another one where it was a series of traffic calming along a route that was parallel to Penn Avenue. That also made there was some awkward, the way the streets were laid out, there were some awkward turns and one-way streets and stuff like that. So the city added these little, these bike lanes to help make that connection legit, which people were doing anyway. The Euclid Neighborway was another one. This is from the pilot. These are going to be turning into actual, like I showed before, the actual neighborhood traffic circles, poured concrete. And these will have landscaping in them soon, by the way. So the one you see in Euclid there is temporary, the way that looks. Southside Neighborway is another one that is a street that parallels East Carson Street. And then the Washington Boulevard Trail, which is a big connection from Negley Run over to the cycling oval, making that more accessible, as well as the Lawrenceville Neighborway, which I showed before. So far there's a whole lot of so that was some projects that happened. The main ones that you can see on the website, the moveforwardpgh.org/projects. There's a whole bunch on their way in the north side. And then Shady Side Squirrel Hill also has a whole bunch of projects coming up. And then we're hoping to see the next neighborhoods clusters that will have some bike infrastructure in the south, west, and the Strip and downtown. Connections to the Strip and downtown are hopefully on their way. If you go to that website that I showed, moveforwardpgh.org/projects, you can see the latest list of things that are either upcoming or in planning or are on their way. And this is just in a general, this is a pretty huge jump for the city in terms of being a little more transparent and clear about what projects are happening, and so that the public has a place to go to now and see the project, click into it, see what's happening, see where the public engagement is, whether it's a public meeting or a survey, et cetera. So that was a really big jump in terms of planning. So now we get to the part where how you can help. Glad you asked. So obviously the moveforwardpgh.org website, the easiest thing to do right now, if you're not on it, is just to sign up for emails that basically will ensure that you get the latest on everything that's coming up. There's public meetings to attend, surveys to attend, and a really big one is just to support programs on social media. As we all have seen, bike lanes and bike infrastructure get dragged pretty heavily in social media, and so it is actually really important to to fight that. And then another thing that I want to plug is our advocate program at Bike Pittsburgh. If you go to that website that's shown, we have like sort of a how-to on 101, like how to write letters to the editor, to your electeds. Like I said, support on social media is always good. And sometimes it's not arguing with people, it's just giving support for stuff is really important. But two things I really wanted to plug were becoming a member of Bike Pittsburgh is another great way if you're not already, but also joining your neighborhood bike ped committee. And if you're not familiar with those, all across the city, we have approximately, there's over a dozen neighborhood specific bike ped committees, that these are the true like on the ground advocates who are really helping push this agenda. So they're not, we don't necessarily run them, but we really give them support and try to guide and help out how we can. But these are local advocates who are pushing for improvements within their neighborhood. They help try to push for projects within the budget, the city's budget. They help out with the numerous things in terms of when a project is happening within that neighborhood. We really look to them and depend on them to help get the word out, help garner support, just generally be like on the ground. You know, we've, for instance, recently with the project on Ellsworth Ave that's in planning, they've been integral in helping, you know, raise awareness for it, get the community involved, whether it's out there handing out flyers to people about the project and public meetings coming up, or writing letters or even doing like pop-up, helping us with pop-up bike lake giveaways and things like that. One thing that we have also on this website is this the Grassroots Advocacy Toolkit, which I suggest everybody check out. It's for people who are involved in the bike ped committee or want to start one. So if you see a blank space in this map to the left, this toolkit will ideally help you figure out how to start one yourself. It kind of has like it basically walks you through all the steps it would take to create your own bike ped committee. And like I said, they are extremely helpful. And we have our community organizer on staff, Anna Tang, who I'm guessing a lot of you know, is really tasked with helping make these things successful. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I don't know how you want to do this, Kaya, if we want to leave this slide up or
Yeah, I
bring up
have not
participants or.
received any questions in the chat. So, you know, send them on in, folks. If you've got any questions, doesn't have to be, you know, totally related to the presentation. We can talk about anything. But yeah, thank you so much, Eric. We
You
appreciate it.
unmuting people or is it just in the chat?
You can feel free to unmute yourself, or let's see, we have Seth is raising his hand, so I can, yeah. Seth, are you unmuted now?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is, I guess, kind of in support, and Eric, you kind of touched on it, in support for bike lanes. I know Bike Pittsburgh has stepped away from enforcement, but I know it's still kind of epidemic level of people parking in bike lanes. Is there a strategy outside of, I mean, I guess building infrastructure and kind of maybe hardening that infrastructure so it's not possible to park, or are there other strategies you think we can take outside of enforcement?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Seth. And also an evolving question. I should say that we have stepped away from armed enforcement is a big part of that. So we have not stepped away from parking enforcement. Just to be clear. Yeah, we definitely do take the fix it first approach, or what we like to call self-enforcing streets, as the best approach, but we understand also that's not possible in every location. So in terms of parking itself, yeah, this you know, quite honestly, while I said we haven't stepped away from parking enforcement, we've also found it hasn't been very successful to have enforcement in terms of parking. As we all know, people think that sidewalks are also places where they can park. And so it's a really difficult situation, you know, for us, because the way that we're tasked to deal with this problem is the city directs us to call 911, and which is something that we have basically, that I think everybody can agree is probably not the best solution to this problem, is to call 911 every time something happens, especially when it's every day, as we have seen the Penn Ave bike lane. And so, you know, it's going to be a case-by-case basis, but for Penn Ave bike lane, for instance, we have been pushing for and still are pushing for, you know, somewhat successfully, and hopefully we will be seeing that come by the end of this year, is basically making it difficult to impossible for people to park in that bike lane. But in other places, it's, you know, I'll be honest, it's something that it's a tough nut to crack. And it is, we have found that in a lot of situations that protecting the bike lanes is with bollards has been successful in a lot of places. But also one thing that we have been pushing for is parking protected bike lanes, which both preserves parking and so allows people to park, as well as provide a protected facility. And so that's something that is, I'll call semi-legal at the moment. It is, if the city wants to install it with their own money on their own streets, they can. But if they want to get statewide funding or federal funding or install it on a state-owned street, that's basically impossible at the moment. So we've been on basically a 2-year campaign to try to legalize parking protected bike lanes in the city. So, and also just as things develop, people get more used to different types of infrastructure at like that stuff I showed earlier. And so, every year we gain more and new tools in our toolbox, so to speak, that I think could help that situation. That was a really long-winded response. So hopefully I somehow answered the question.
No, I thanks, Eric. I wrestle with that as well, and I think I'll use that language where you step back from armed enforcement. I think that's a good, strategy, at least in the interim, because I live in Mount Lebanon now, and they have an anonymous tip line, but it kind of just goes into the ether. But I also don't want to be relying on the police for traffic enforcement or people parking on sidewalks, which even in Mount Lebanon and most of the South Hills slopes is an epidemic. I lived in Bon Air, and people park on the sidewalk as a right, essentially. So it's like you said, tough nut to crack.
Yeah, and I should say, like the kind of the problem we see in Pittsburgh is the we have the parking authority, who are not armed enforcement, but they really only deal with really specific situations like meters, like metered areas, and as well as street sweeping. So anything outside of that, they're not really equipped to deal with. So they're not really equipped to deal with, there's somebody parked in a bike lane. They send the armed police out. And so that's something that we've been trying to push for, like how do we change that? Like, like for the most part, people are just looking for, a ticket and not, an armed officer that to show up that where things, as we have seen, can escalate in ways that nobody wants.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? I haven't received anything in the chat, I don't think, but feel free to raise your hand. I can unmute you and feel free to ask any questions. Very easy audience here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd like to bring up an issue. This is Yale. With the proliferation of e-bikes, we're seeing a lot more people who aren't that experienced riding on the roads, on the trails, especially on the trails, we see that. And I'm just wondering if there's anything in planning in terms of educating, addressing some of these issues. Again, the trails are now, there are more people, less experienced. The average speed on the trail is now a lot on the trails, and again, as well as on the roads. People are faster now, and there are definitely issues there. I mean, I would suggest it would be nice to have some kind of safety blitz where, but I guess Bike Pittsburgh does the light giving out lights. You're doing that in the next few days, but even showing literature and reviewing safety with people, etc. And if there is any kind of, there's got to be certain write-ups and literature that we can pass out to try to educate people more on this and to address it.
It's a good question, Yale. So first, I wanted to say that the bike plan has that plus in it for a reason, and that plus, the words we call the Bike Plus plan, is to recognize that there's a whole lot of new types of devices that the bike plan will sort of encompass, and that includes e-bikes, as well as maybe someday scooters, if they are electric scooters, if they ever get legalized in Pennsylvania. So sort of give a little bit of like recognize that that's an emerging technology. But yeah, you're right. The education around it needs to catch up to what's happening now. And we've had, I don't know, 100+ years of bicycle education, but e-bikes are fairly new and getting more popular by the minute. And it is something that that we definitely need to address. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot or say that we are going to do this at the moment, but we are, these kind of comments are really appreciated because we are rethinking our education department at the moment. So things like that, I think are, so I'm really glad you brought that comment up. I can't say that we have something planned at the moment, but I definitely agree with you that it is necessary, and I'm seeing the problem out there as well. I think e-bikes, are going to be a great resource for people to not drive and get out and leave the car at home, and just make getting around town easier on two wheels. But yeah, there is this this level where they are a little bit harder to handle, and you definitely see people who maybe are less experienced on them and not following the rules. So right now everything is is fairly new. The city's playing catch up, the state's playing catch up in terms of education and even what is legal and what isn't legal. So anyway, with that, I'll say thanks for that comment, and duly noted. But at the moment, there is no official plan.
Yeah, and I'll follow that up with saying that, we are looking at a partial transition of the Healthy Ride fleet into, they're going to be releasing some e-bikes shortly. So that kind of education is absolutely going to be necessary to teach people about when everybody's able to rent e-bikes and ride them around the city. We're going to have to, have some sort of push of education around that. So I definitely think that'll be something that we are going to be working to address as soon as that rollout occurs.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. I forgot to mention that. So thank you for bringing that up.
I don't have any particular details on exactly when that's going to be, but I know our friends at Healthy Ride are working very hard to make that happen right now. So stay tuned. We do have some chat questions. Sandra would like to know, from your perspective, what have been some of the challenges and opportunities for the Shady Side Squirrel Hill planning and implementation?
Well, I guess I'll start with the challenges. I'll say everywhere, for every project, the biggest challenge is always the P word: parking. Parking. It's the first that as a bike advocate, I spend more time talking about parking than even bicycles. So how to figure out, where parking is, say, oversupplied and undersupplied, where people have and also what's happening in the parking. Not all parking is the same. Some parking is obviously like, in areas where there's row homes and there's no driveway, then people obviously have to put their cars on the street. But there's other areas where maybe the parking dynamics are different and it's not so much residents. Like if it's a neighborhood that has very few car owners, but a lot of on-street parking, maybe there's something else going on, and figuring out why people are parking there. Are they just parking there because it's free and they're just parking there as using it as a park and ride lot so that they can jump on the bus for free? So there's a whole lot of dynamics that happen, and parking is the thing that basically is the reason a project can or cannot happen. So and people, as I'm sure we've all seen in Pittsburgh, people feel very connected to their parking space, especially when it's in front of their house, even though sometimes it's a public parking area situation. So as far as challenges, that's got to be the number one challenge I've seen. Everybody can agree that safety is important, and that bike lanes, in my mind, people agree that bike lanes are important, but a lot of people are not willing to do the trade-off for for parking. So that's why certain another challenge I'll say we've had with some of this is especially with the parking with protected bike lanes is a challenge that we see here in Pittsburgh and elsewhere is that when you put a protected bike lane in, you still have to also deal with ADA requirements in terms of making sure that buses can pull to the curb so that someone who's in a wheelchair can board the bus, because what the way it works now is a bus can pull to the curb. There might not be a curb ramp there for the wheelchair to get off the curb. So the bus ramp will actually go to the sidewalk and then someone can roll right onto the bus. Super important, super valuable, understandably. But what happens is when you actually protect a bike lane, that limits a bus's ability to get to the curb. So how do you deal with that? Well, then one way to deal with that is to raise the bike lane up. And that's why you see the bike lanes raised on Stanwix, on Liberty Avenue, and Stanwix in downtown, so that basically somebody in a wheelchair can cross the bike lane into the bus. So it's important to, like, when you see a bus pulling up to a bus stop there, you need to slow down and make sure that people can get on and off safely. And they always paint those areas in bright green. And so anyway, that's been a pretty big challenge, because it creates a huge amount of cost burden on the project itself. So you go from a project that goes from paint to now you're pouring concrete or asphalt and having to use a lot more expensive interventions and expensive more thermoplastic, which can be expensive, the markings and stuff like that. So in terms of challenges, we've seen that basically be the deal killer on some projects. As far as opportunities go, while the project itself is a challenge, I think this program has brought the opportunity of Ellsworth Avenue into light. It's one of the most biked corridors in the city. And in short, it doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work if you're driving. It doesn't work if you're walking. It doesn't work if you're riding a bike. And so there's been a whole lot of energy around doing something on Ellsworth. And what that something is not quite clear. But what I think has occurred with this program and this project specifically is that it really brought a lot of people together in terms of stakeholders coming together to think through the issue, think through what can be done, what's really necessary. One of the issues we see on Ellsworth, and everybody in the corridor recognizes, is that it's used as a cut through, where if you're trying to get from one side of Ellsworth to the other, maybe Fifth Avenue is better for you, or Center Avenue, or Baum Boulevard. And so how do we figure out how to eliminate or reduce the numbers of people who are using it as a cut through because they think it's a shortcut, while still allowing access to businesses and homes and churches and schools and whatnot. So it's really caused everybody to really rethink, like, okay, well, what are things that we can do and try out that could still allow people to access all the things they need to do while also eliminating that cut through. And if something emerges from that is useful, I think the opportunity is that we'll hopefully be able to see that in other similar streets in the city. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you. We have a couple more tying into the kind of challenges with protecting bike lanes. Chris would like to know what plans there might be to improve cleanliness of some of the lanes, particularly the protected lanes.
Yeah, that is another challenge. I will say, there's two challenges there, which is the street sweeping in the summer and snow plowing in the winter. So the snow plowing in the winter is the easier one to deal with, because the city can put plows on if they have smaller trucks. They have some equipment to do that. The street sweeping is the harder one if it's protected. And this is where a lot of the trade-offs happen with design. When you have the two-way protected bike lanes, such as Penn Avenue, they're able to get a street sweeper in it. But when you have a one-way protected bike lane, like you see on Forbes Avenue in Oakland, there's no street sweepers. They just literally don't have street sweepers that can clean that. So at least in that situation, they work with Pitt to help clean the bike lanes in the protected bike lanes in that area. But not every neighborhood has a University of Pittsburgh to help out with that. And so the city knows they need to acquire this equipment. You know, it's not cheap. They are, you know, it's one of those things like we get the bike lanes in and then you figure out all the things you need to do to maintain them. So now they're in the process of trying to figure out how to procure those. And then once you get to that point, it's not quite as simple as just like, oh, now we have this machine. They have to make sure that each individual DPW district has the machine. So, or figuring out how to share them, et cetera. So there's a lot of logistics involved in it. It's a lot more complicated than I ever imagined getting into this, thinking like, oh, I just want some bike lanes. But then when you actually like, you know, start talking to the people who have to implement it, you know, it's never quite as simple as that. So they are working on, with long story short is they are working on procuring that equipment. Hopefully they will soon, but I honestly don't know when that's going to happen, but we're very aware that it's an issue.
Great. A couple questions from Seth. I'm just going to roll both your questions into one. Seth says, really love the Bike Plus plan, but have we missed the window to address the retail roving robots?
Well, that did happen after the Bike Plus plan. So, you know, whoops. But I'm not sure if the roving robots would be included in that. I got to give the city some credit on this. They actually have they have a staffer who was hired to deal with autonomous vehicles, not these things at first, but the Uber, well, formerly Uber, Aurora, Argo, et cetera, to help be the city liaison with those companies. And then those the delivery robots happened. And so those all got lumped into her like under her umbrella. So she has been, her name's Erin Clark. She's been really on it there's a committee of advocates that she looks to help inform her on issues that arise. She has direct line with PennDOT on how that whole thing is playing out. And so, and they've been pretty good advocates, I think, in trying to push PennDOT to be to give the city more leeway in terms of these robots. But yeah, I'm not going to say we all missed the boat on that. I mean, I don't think very few people knew that bill was even, that legalized them in the state of Pennsylvania, was even happening as it was rushed through. So it was a surprise to everybody. Not gonna try to paint a better picture on that.
Mm-hmm. Second question from Seth was really looking forward to when we can talk about bike parking. Interested in the concept the Uni pod, is that correct, is bringing to NYC. Is secure bike parking on the radar here in Pittsburgh?
A little bit. So one project that we worked on with the parking authority was the 3rd Avenue garage secure bike parking. It's not the pod because it's already indoors, but basically we worked on a caged in area that you get a key fob to, that then you can access and then lock your bike inside of a caged in area. So the only people who have access to your bicycle are other people with the key. Integrating that into the whole parking authority, leasing system, which was really cool. As far as those other pods go, I haven't seen the city itself working on that. But what I have seen is like the universities kind of doing that, or other kinds of businesses. So we work, my coworker Christine has worked with businesses to have secure bike rooms. In the past, we worked with Uber, formerly Uber, now Argo, on a bike room for their employees and things like that. So it's more of an individual basis.
Great. Yale would like to know, why aren't there bike lanes on Butler from Highland Park to 50th or so? There's plenty of room and no parking. Is it a state road? I will answer your question that yes, Butler is a state road, but maybe you can say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a state road. It's funny, we actually just had a conversation this morning with the city about this. They are, as part of this Move Forward program, they are tasked with looking at that street right now. And, it's a matter of what can be done. It's not quite correct that there is no parking. There are sections, a lot of those sections do have parking. It's just that people park on the sidewalk. So then it plays into question, like if you do something on there, well, then we should do something so that people can park safely on the street, which then frees up the sidewalks. So and then, yes, it is a PennDOT road, which is also always a limiting factor on a lot of projects. They have ultimate say on a lot of the issues. So in short, they are looking at it at the moment. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but they are tasked with looking at it. So hopefully we'll see something come out of it.
Yeah. Question from Ben. Anything we can do about dangerous sewer grates and holes and pipes in many of the bike lanes?
Whew, yeah. So there was one brief moment where the sewer authority actually had a program where you could tweet at them and help get those replaced, and it was working on a couple. It did work. I have noticed that a lot of ours, 311, I will say, is the best place at the moment. While we all know that could take forever. I have noticed that majority of ours are either the bike safe ones or the semi bike safe ones, where we don't have the parallel, the ones that run along your line of path. They're all a lot of them are at an angle. But they are still not there. Those are the ones I would call the semi bike friendly ones, because you're not going to fall in, but you could still obviously slip on them, or if you hit it wrong, you could fall in. But right now, the best, I wish I had a better answer for that, but 311 is the best place. And I have seen success with getting these replaced. Often it is the best time to do it is when they're doing road work, or doing, that's the time to really nod them to replace a whole bunch at once, because they're in there doing the road work anyway. If they have to order new sewer grates, we might as well get them to do the bike friendly one. And I have seen them be responsive to that.
Mhm. And I'll also say 311 somewhat seems to prioritize based on the volume of requests for certain things. So if you have friends who are also concerned, submit multiple 311 requests about the same issue, and you might get a bit more responsivity from DPW.
And I'd say that your local bike ped committees that would be a really great project for a local bike ped committee to take on, to then help figure out all the necessary steps to especially if there's sometimes it's one sewer grate that needs to be fixed. So sometimes the local bike ped committees are a perfect resource to help figure out how to make that happen, because it's not always the same.
Yeah. Daniel would like to know, are there any plans to add signage at popular entrances to the river trail system, i.e. sign at the entrance of 2nd Ave or Greenfield Ave that says downtown 4 miles, Point State Park 4.5 miles? Think this would be useful to people to make them aware of what attractions the trail can lead to.
Yeah, so the Bike Plus plan does talk about wayfinding in it. It is something that I also agree would be very useful. They have been adding more wayfinding, especially with the new neighborways. So if you go on any of the neighborways, at the time of installation, they've also installed things like you're saying, Children's Hospital, quarter mile, or whatever it might be. So they have started to do that. And the idea is that as they build out some of this infrastructure, they will include it as they go along. But as far as an overall plan, that doesn't really exist at the moment. But I could see the trails also being part of the earlier plan for that implementation, because a lot of those do have some signs, but you're right. They could definitely use some more.
Mhm. And I think in terms of wayfinding signs, I'll bring up Ben's comment from earlier about more signage downtown on Penn Avenue or any areas where there's two-way bike lanes, potentially there could be more signage put in to get folks to look both ways for bikes and not just the one way that the cars are coming. Yeah. Any other questions? I don't see anyone else in the chat, but we have a couple more minutes here if there's any remaining questions. No. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. Again, if you are interested in becoming a member of Bike Pittsburgh, if you're not already a member of Bike Pittsburgh, this is the month to join. You get a free gift if you join or renew this month. There's some awesome information on our website. I put it in the chat earlier, but I believe it's bikepgh.org/membership. And we are also hosting commuter cafes on Friday for our normal bike to work day sort of activity. So if you join or renew or come see us at a commuter cafe, we can join or renew the membership at that point. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. Eric's email is on the screen there. Eric, did you have any closing words?
Just thanks for hanging out with me and listening and hearing about the whole Move Forward program and bike planning in Pittsburgh in general. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.